Hey, what's up everybody? My name's Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Grab yourself a coffee because we are going to be talking about something that I've kind of touched on and is going to be in addition to the recent talking head videos that I've put up, but I want to talk about the whole idea of the perspective of how music is made, how it is good and you can use it as a fundamental, but like where the jump off point is when you start looking at trying to make music like the people that you look up to, if you're in my world. And what I mean by my world is, I like to make experimental bass music and cool beats that are wonky and, lots of sound design and stuff. The sound design is relevant. It's also irrelevant, but I'm going to kind of back up for a second because what I want to bring up is the traditional means of composing, or the traditional means about like how most people think about making music. And so if you're a beginner, this is a great video for you to understand, or to watch rather. So most people typically, whenever you talk about making a song, regardless of the genre, you pick out your instruments, you go for traditional things, or even if you make electronic music, you pull up some presets and then you start to write your drums and then write stuff in MIDI. Like I was watching another streamer the other day, and after they found some drums that they liked, they started opening up presets and trying to lay things down on the timeline, which I do want to talk about that in another video. Not that he was doing anything wrong, but just in the means of why that's difficult to make work, and like, some different strategies to overcome that. So subscribe to the channel if that seems interesting. But the issue with it is that there is a huge conformity in how you start to approach sounds and how you approach the compositions themselves, and also about how you think about your imagination and phrasing and stuff. So for one, there is nothing wrong with that if that's how you like to make music. But I've noticed that if I wanted to make really cool sounds that I couldn't even imagine myself, or like come up with really cool phrases or just weird stuff, the sound design is one thing. And I've talked about that, about how you can make any sound into anything. But in the grander scheme of things, in the ideas of how do you make this stuff work in a track, you have to break out of that. You have to break out of, I need drums, I need a bass, I need some keys, I need a pad, I need this, and then you go search for that specifically. Because what ends up happening is you kind of have this cutoff point about where that's the only thing that can be useful to you within your music itself. So I've talked about this and I've done this many times, and we can do it again, but I have this philosophy that's shared among my peers that you can turn any sound into any kind of sound. That doesn't mean that I can turn a kick into a Skrillex bass. I might be able to pull something like that off. Well, I'm not Skrillex, so no, but a cool growly bass or something like that. But even still, like, that's not the approach. Is you can make it into any kind of sound. So I don't know, Cool, we can take something like this. I don't even care. Now, the thing about this is that we have a sound. We have a reference now. And my intention behind trying to make something cool is not, I'm going to turn this into something specific. It is, I need to try to utilize this as a reference point in which to explore different possibilities. But in that matter of exploring these possibilities, you have to be able to identify the music in your exploration. I'm going to say that one more time because this should be the most eye-opening thing, or the intention behind the cultivation. You need to learn to identify the music within your experimentation. Rolling sampler is a great tool for that. And what I mean by that is that while we start to mangle this, while we start to change this and form this, we need to start to try to keep our ears open in which to start finding sounds that we wouldn't necessarily like go for with that specific intention. There's also a fallacy that, everything that you want to do or whatever is designable within a synthesizer, or it comes from a synthesizer. Unless if you already know about like Amon Tobin and all that other stuff, there are so many different ways to get to weird sounds and stuff. And I've said this a million times, but I can't tell you how many people I've talked to and I was like, how'd you make this sound? And they were like, I don't know, I was just messing around. But they're not good at sound design because they can say, I know how to make this specific sound. They're good at sound design because they know how to mess around. They know how to explore and how to make the right mistakes as opposed to trying to make the correct sound. Does that make sense? So whenever you're trying to do something, and this is something that I've realized that this is why I don't make like how to bass videos or how to bite or anything, is that when these people are doing this stuff, there's some exceptions. Like I said, they're trying to explore. They're trying to find different stuff. They might spend a day doing bass, but they're breaking all the rules. They've got stereo in their sub. They've got, it's clipping. It's going way over 0 dB. Usually those are the only two rules that I try to, the mids are way louder than their fundamental, or, they're breaking all of these rules and not really caring because they're looking for timbre or looking for expressions of unique sounds. And sometimes you have to be able to do that in order to find those things. You have to break out of this idea of like a traditional means of approaching and start to find phrases and start to find patterns that then you can go back and start to apply the traditional means of composition. So I know I haven't done any sound yet, and like I said, this is going to be a talking head video, and hopefully this is still interesting to you because I know that I tend to yap. But the thing about this that is so profound to me is that when you start to take yourself out of this means of like, I'm going to make a hip hop beat, or, I'm going to make drum and bass, and, you think about the drums and the bass or whatever, like you just start trying to find different stuff that you've never made before. But if you can practice the imagination part of contextualizing stuff, then stuff begins to jump out at you at a much faster rate. It starts to become interesting to you at a much faster rate, and it becomes a lot easier for the music to write itself. Thanks, Chi. Thanks, Cage. Thank you, Zane. You might hear me mention those guys a lot, and it's not really even about me being big fans. This is the stuff that they taught me. This is the stuff that has changed my world, in which how I start to look at designing sounds, and which also how I look at creating music, halftime genre aside. The idea behind all this stuff is that it should be liberating. Like, music should be liberating. And instead of you trying to, instead of you trying to like spend all of this hardship trying to overcome your technical inadequacies, it should be a matter of understand the structure of how music is made, understand, what makes something sound good. So having some basic mixing, and then understand that now it doesn't matter, and you can break those rules, and you can always kind of like play along these lines of back and forth of, this is too much. Okay, well now I've got this sound, but it's extremely, messed up or whatever. That's where some of the expertise of like mixing and all that, or making it bigger or something, will come back into play. But you get what I'm saying? So I guess the best way to show you is that I'm not going to write a beat today, but I am going to take just this stupid tom and start to mangle the crap out of this, and then just show you some potential loops or potential means of, cool stuff that I find to be able to use for a future track. Yeah. I feel like this is kind of an abstract idea, but again, like I can't stress this enough of how important it is to like take yourself out of the traditional means of composition and instead get into the world of, how do you even describe this? It's pretty profound in the way that it was given to me. Maybe not in the way that I'm giving it to you, but in the means of anything can be anything, and you have to be able to like let go of your traditional means of how you think you're supposed to compose if you want to make the more experimental things, if you want to find the originality again within tunes. And keep in mind that this approach scales. It can be a matter of maybe you do have some sick drums that are all ready to go, or maybe you have nothing. Maybe you have, maybe you've got something, but you need some more, or maybe you take the original idea that you have and you mangle that. You don't have to use this to create your entire track. You can, and I've done that before. I've made a whole song out of a kick, but you know what I mean? Like, to what degree like this becomes necessary, don't feel like this is like the only way or whatever. So I'm not going for anything specific on this. In fact, I could probably throw up any of this stuff. I don't know. Let's just pull up the devices and just find something interesting. So, okay, sorry, I already kind of cheated because these are some of the most useful tools. Everything is useful, but we've got a comb, all things C, just for fun. What else I'm going to do is maybe something like the DC offset, because you're not supposed to use this stuff for sound design, right? A DS, or it doesn't matter. We've got a bunch of stuff on here. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but let's go ahead and get into exploring, and we're going to find a riff out of this. Okay, that's already kind of cool. I haven't touched anything yet, but let's go ahead and set up some kind of modulation. We could do steps. That might be a better idea. Let's go steps, and we're going to set this to bipolar. I think that's bipolar, I want to say. So we can randomize that, and then we can set that, yeah, with transport, and then maybe make this a little bit faster. So 16th note. Great. Let's go ahead and do the same thing. So we can add steps, mess with that. I'm going to go ahead and do that here. And then I think that we'll keep the delay here, put that on 100% mix. And then maybe what we can do is move this over here and move this around and make that a little bit shorter. Cool, that's pretty neat. So I didn't say that I was going to only use Bitwig exclusive things, but if we were to add something like a fuse compressor now, because here's the thing, I'm already starting to hear stuff that's rhythmic, and I guess you could say I did that on purpose, but it was kind of just what I was gravitating towards. But the thing is like, you know, I don't know. It's like you can put the intention behind any of this stuff. So I guess we'll start with rhythm. I'll pull something out and then I'll do something completely different. It doesn't really matter. And I'm not really here to try to prove to you anything that this is going to be like incredible or like, check this out. It's more of like, hey, this is how I think about making music these days. And this is how I try to... This is why sound design tutorials become irrelevant, even though this could be technically categorized as a sound design tutorial. But like, I really don't even want you to look at like what it is that I'm doing, because the only intention that I have right now is breaking the sound and doing something more interesting than what we started with. And that's what I want you to take away. So don't be like, oh, Alckemy used a delay and a comb and a convolution and a bit ape, and I can't recreate the sound. Well, you're doing it wrong. Stop doing that shit. It's not going to be helpful to you. What is going to be helpful to you is understanding a couple of rules, which I had mentioned before, of be mindful of how loud your signal is, be mindful of the frequency content, be mindful of the stereo content. That doesn't mean that you can't break any of those rules, but if you're aware of them, then controlling the sound becomes way easier. So you'll notice even on the fuse compressor that I clipped it. So that means that if I turn it way the heck up and change it to, you know, doing something like this, I know that it's not going to go over 0 dB. So now I don't care. This will still get loud. So that's one thing with clipping, is that if you clip something, if you turn it up, it's still going to get louder. So you need to protect your ears. But it's not going to go over 0 dB. And I guess in some cases it doesn't matter if you're working in 32-bit float, but I don't know. It helps me reference specific things. So the other thing that I want out of this is maybe something like an extractor. And let's go ahead and just pull this up. This is kind of like a cheat code for Beats mode, but in a plugin format. So all right, sick. So check this out. We're going to come back to this in just a second, but we've got rolling sampler. And the other thing that I will say is whenever you're doing experimental sound design, one of the most helpful things that you can do or that you can think about is going the next step. So don't be like, this is it. This is the only sound design that I'm doing, and I'm going to make something work out of this, and I'm not going to touch it at all. Sometimes repeating this step can be super helpful. Like even doing something like pulling this in here and doing it again through the same chain, that could be something, but it doesn't really matter at this point. I'm kind of just messing around. So maybe we can take something from here, and I'm just going to move over here, doesn't matter where, and we are going to drag this out, maybe like so, and let's just listen to some of this and see what it sounds like. Oh, also I'm going to set this to a repitch because I'm fond of that. Okay, so here we go. We have a phrase, right? Or at least it's a potential phrase. Okay, so that's something that we could just put a kick snare pattern over, or a clap or whatever. I don't know why they're subbing that, but that's funny. Doesn't matter. Right? So don't be afraid to break this either. Let's see what else we can get from this. I kind of like that a little better. See, right now I'm having fun. I'm not like, I don't really care about this. I'm not trying to speedrun this or whatever, but I'm just like, oh, I'm tweaking it. I'm tweaking it. I'm tweaking it. And I'm in this groove right now of whatever is going on here, to just enjoy this kind of process of, all right, we're wheeling and dealing now. We're kind of doing whatever, right? So you can go back to this if you want to, or we can start to find some other layers or something, layers or something, if you have the desire to, but it's not really all that important, because right now we're just messing around with sound and we're just kind of having fun finding stuff. Okay, so that's like a cool little fill right there. So we could use that later for something. But you see what I'm saying? It's like I heard that, and even though it's not what I'm looking for right now, I'm like, oh, I could see that being useful somewhere else. And that's exactly the moments that I'm talking about, right? The little it sounds like a tape stop or like a DJ scratch almost. So while we're playing with all this stuff, like, if you're only like looking for a bass and that's the only thing that you're trying to attack, like, then you're kind of pigeonholing yourself. But if you're trying to keep an open mind for anything else that you might find in between, then that's where you're like, oh, this could be cool later, and we could put this in our pocket. Something else that I need to be better at is using this as a bank. So just putting this here and then deleting it or whatever. Maybe doing like a Command J or something, but that's a really useful tip. So that way you can keep like your project relatively cleaner, but you don't have to utilize that. That's just a thing that I'm like, hey, there's that. But you get what I'm saying? But as I'm working on this now, I'm just kind of having fun about being like, oh, how does this sound? Oh, how does this pit? And I'm not in such a rush to make it work because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. This is practice. It's practice, even though I am in the means of like writing a tune. And if something comes about from this, then great. If it doesn't, then you know what I mean? It's cultivation. Okay, that sounds kind of cool. So maybe let's stretch this out even more and pull this out. And let's see what this sounds like if I were to stretch that a little bit longer. Maybe even longer. Okay, so what happens if we, maybe bounce this and then we set this into slice mode? Sorry, we can set this into none. Not quite as interesting. We can set this to here. Okay, cool. So now we've got another riff on here, and we can kind of go along the same way of okay. So this is where I talk about like sprucing sounds up and stuff, right? We've got the rhythm of that. That's the most important thing. This sounds like crap. Like it's nothing interesting, but how do we make the sound better? Well, we either add harmonics or we start to shape it into something that it can actually sound like it's some kind of instrument, right? So that's where to reach something with the intention about being like, all right, well now I might add some kind of convolution reverb or something. Maybe I'll probably use the kilohertz one just because it's purely readily available samples. So what I mean by that is the samples that are through Convolver, that like the list, you can put anything into it, but this just has like a specific set of things that I use that will be a little bit easier to work with, or a little bit more immediate rather. But listen to this now. So now it's a little bit more physical, right? We can also do other things like adding short delays, adding small amounts of other reverb, adding a comb filter, all different kinds of stuff in order to like make something more metallic. And that's where the sound design expertise will come in, is knowing how to characterize a sound more so than how do I make something specific, right? How do you make something seem more metallic? How do you make something seem big? How do you make something morph in the way that you want it to, right? Those are all specific things that are like, how do you grill a steak? There's a lot of different ways to cook a steak, but if you grill it, I want the little grill lines or whatever, like that's a characteristic, a seasoning, right? That's more so the specific kinds of tricks that will help you out and also get you to a place to where you're going to be able to find stuff, rather than how do I make just one specific sound? Because if you look at it from that perspective, then the only thing that you're considering is the end result. And that's why I say, like, I try to get people away from you know, how to sound like this artist or how to sound like this artist, because generally that's the perspective that people have going into it. But like I had said before, if you actually go back and watch those videos and maybe the sound sucks, but somebody has a very peculiar way about how they process something, you might be able to see something like that and be like, there might be something cool that I can put that spin on. You've got to learn to think critically when it comes into making sounds like this. And like I said, we're not even doing anything at this moment. We're just, you know, effing around with sounds and having fun. But you must learn to be a critical thinker if you want to succeed in making, you know, music that you're going to be happy with. Because if the only thing, like the only resource that you have is Splice, and that is as far as your imagination goes, I mean, yeah, or AI, you know, like, sure, then there's nothing wrong with that. But for the people that are like, man, I'm really about this and I really want to figure out how to make unique sounds or make unique rhythms or make, you know, just music that is more personal. And let's say you're not a music theory person. Like, let's say, I guess the only way that I can describe this is, let's say you're trying to walk a similar path that I am. This is kind of what goes into that. This is kind of the idea or the approach that I'm into, as opposed to, I need a piano sample, or, you know, I need a cool bass riff, so I'm going to go download a preset pack and then try to utilize a specific preset in there verbatim. Even with my stuff, right? Like, if you look at my presets, they're hella volatile, but they're designed to be warped and manipulated, and they're designed to be used by me, to be honest. They're designed to be a starting point of which to start doing stuff like this, because it's not even about the sound. It's just a starting place, you know, something with movement, something with rhythm, something with an interesting timbre. If I hear a cool tone, you know, I think that, I don't remember what the original sound was, right? It was a tom, but if we were to duplicate this and change this back into stretch and change this tempo back into whatever the heck it was, you know, here's the thing. Hold on, let me listen to this real quick. Oh, that was cool. Let me go ahead and turn off all of the processing on this for just a hot second. Lots of fuse compressors. Yeah, not enough. Okay, so there's a tone in that. I talk about this all the time, but, you know, it doesn't matter what direction you want to start in, but listen to this. That's F sharp 3. And if you didn't know how to find the fundamental of something, this is how you do it. You don't need Pro Q. You can use EQ plus or just a parametric EQ in which to see the notational relationship. But what happens if I boost that? Okay, sick. So now what I can do with that is I can go, I'm just going to pull it out from Rolling Sampler. Look, we can create a melody with this. This is an F sharp 3, so that means that I can look up an F sharp scale, or I can even do something along the lines of, I'll show you the easier version, actually, in case if you're a beginner. I don't know who watches my videos. I wish that more people would comment and more people would interact with my channel. Shout out to everybody who does that. I want to have a conversation with you. I want to talk to you because I want to know who my audience is. But we can set the root note of this to F sharp, probably F sharp 2. Let me see. Hold on one second. That's the default phase plant thing. But yeah. Oops, that's supposed to be 1 up. Okay, there we go. We got our rhythm, or we got our riff, right? Like, that's all it has to be. So, you know, we could take something kind of like that, maybe on that second half. And I don't know what the notational expression of this is, but let me listen to this real quick. Okay, what happens if we lower this? okay, we probably want to keep that at the original pitch, but now we can manipulate this and start doing some sick stuff with it. You know, it's like, what do you want to do? But with the amalgamation of these things, you know, it's like you're only probably 1 or 2 steps away from doing some really cool stuff. And the more that you kind of open yourself up to these kinds of experiments, and like you don't try to tread too closely along what you're doing, like you're bound to find something. If you're open-minded to it. There is also the other side that some people talk to me about, and I do want to touch on this. Some people are like, yo, I have the problem of exploring too much and I can't make a decision. And that's honestly a good problem to have, because that means that you're full of ideas. So my advice to you on that matter is, like, if you're already well acquainted with this, because I'm not the first person to do this, I'm not the person who made this up, just let it be known. But if you're already well acquainted with how to make music like this, then my advice to you would be jump on the first idea that you hear, and you can start making more ideas, but try to make it relative to the centerpiece of what you make your beat out of, right? So this is the most, this is melodic, so it's the easiest to attach myself to. But if we listen to this real quick, sorry, I wasn't expecting that. Hold on one second. There's my beat. Mixing aside, whatever, yeah, but and then like you just do like a pitch down 808 or something, right? That's how, it's basically a speed run to a riff. That's the goal. Speed run to something that sounds kind of cool, and then you make a beat out of that. And then the cool thing is that this idea scales, because I told you that at more towards the beginning of the video, but you could do something like this. You could also change the key if you don't like the key with a frequency shifter or a pitching or something, or you could also take pieces of this, right? So like, let's say you're at the beginning stages of this and you're not like, I don't know, Copycat gave me a really piece of advice. Shout out to Andre. Sorry, lots of shout outs, but Copycat gave me this idea of something that he did back in the day, because I don't know if he still does it or not, but he was like, yeah, I try to make like one bar as interesting as possible and then I move on. I think that's a wonderful way to work. It's not the only way to work though. Let's say this is your core idea and you're going to start building a riff around this, but then you can be like, yo, I want to take this somewhere else. So maybe you just only take this piece here, and then you repeat it and then do something a little bit different right here. So like, or you could just take this piece right here and be like, all right, this is a B section. Let's go ahead and stretch it out. So you could do something like this. I think the thing is now is that I'm starting to hear ideas, and so for me, I would probably want to go like dot 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 dot, or something like that. And that's where the imagination part comes in. That's where the inspiration comes in, because you start wanting to have bias towards what it is that you're watching. Okay, raise your hand if you all have ever watched one of my streams or someone else's streams and you all have given a piece of feedback or like a suggestion to another producer because you start hearing something. I'm guilty of it too. Yeah, like, because you're like, oh, that would be cool if you did this. That would be cool if you did this. Like, you need to figure out how to do that to yourself, for yourself rather, because while it's great that you can give someone else some advice over things that you can hear or whatever, like, how do you inspire yourself? And honestly, if you don't have that cultivation for yourself, then don't give other people advice just as an etiquette thing, because, you got to practice what you preach. But in saying that, you can use it as reference, you can use it as inspiration without actually telling the person, because you could be like, oh, that's really cool how they, just came up with this idea and I have no idea how. But rather than trying to do what they did, you take inspiration from it and try to just walk in a similar approach, because the thing is like, I don't even care about timbre right now. Like, this isn't my favorite sound in the world, but I know that this could become something different. But the rhythm is there, and I could continue to kind of play along or dance along these things. And because it's tonal, you know, because there is something that has an identifiable pitch, we can always manipulate it, right? So we could do something like, let me just make something very simple, but I'm going to take and just work with these three things. Okay, that's actually kind of cool. I want this to be a little bit more off. So maybe something like this. Okay, cool. Now check this out. You ready? This is the most interesting thing that you will ever see. You guys ready for this? Let me see if I have something here so that way I don't have to waste your time with doing sound design. I could, but I think that's soloed. Yeah. Okay, now I pull a preset out because it's just a simple bass or something, but you know what I mean? Like, and that's why I say that it scales, is because at any point in time you can use specific things that you know are going to work with you in order to jump off. I probably wouldn't prefer the Phantom 808 bass. I'd probably prefer something that's a little bit more like, yeah, something like that, or, you know, something that might even have like a longer pitch. So, you know, again, I'm hearing stuff and I have a preference now. I have something to where I'm like, I know that I want to do something with this. And that is the funnest part. You know, something like that, to where it's like, I'm not playing this in time. There it is. But you see, I'm just like playing riffs now, or playing something in MIDI that follows along, or yeah, follows along with this, because we can keep the same clap pattern, or we can even change it if we want to. So we can do something like this. So maybe we might not want to have that first thing, or this little like wah at the second one. So maybe a little bit tighter. So. Right, it has a bounce to it already. Now we can add in some of this other stuff and just be like, okay, well, here's our second variation. Okay, so there's all this other stuff in between that, oops, I think I just hid that. Yeah, I think I hit Command H. But if we were to bounce this, right, we can just take the stuff that sounds good on here. So we can just take like this first thing right here and be like, okay, now let's create something a little bit different. So cool, we can take this and oops, start to dip this out. I told you I'm not going to be writing a beat. I'm just talking about like how to start moving creatively, but it's got a crazy transient on it. So maybe what we can do is just fade it in just a little bit. So, and then time shift it. And we could put like a bandpass on it because it's a little bit like harsh. So now what I'm going to do is I want it to be a little bit more like ta 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 ta, because right now it's kind of like taka 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 taka. So what we might want to do is kind of move this off. Yeah, you see now that kind of has a little bit more of a roll to it as opposed to like the perfect swing. So from here, from this jump off point, it doesn't matter what the hell you do, because as long as you add a kick to this, you could literally just add a one note sub and you've got an idea. And we made this from a tom, right? We made percussion out of it. We can continue with the percussion if we want to. We can continue making stuff out of this. Hell, let's just do one more experiment where we find some kind of pad out of this, right? So what I'm going to do is a couple of things. I'm going to add in a big sky. And then I'm actually not going to use, hold on. So right now I just want to focus on that first tone because we're going to be making something that is just within that key. So, you know, that's where some of the intention comes in as well. Like, yeah, you could definitely do like the semitone thing, but the thing is that I want to find something that's going to be relatively musical and usable. So we'll start with something like this. We can add in our fuse compressor. Shout out to Minimal Audio. I use the fuse compressor on everything. It just makes stuff sound really good in a very relatively natural way. You can't overdo it, but just turning the threshold up on both of these is a great place to start. But and then also saturation. So now we could just make clouds. And what I mean by clouds is we can just use copious amounts of reverb, maybe some band pass filtering or something, and yeah, I think that's what I'll do. Or maybe I'll even make it rhythmic. So I'll grab something like this and make this jump around. It doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter. This is a starting point. So everything that I'm doing right now is just a means of like, okay, let's throw this together and then let's be like, how does it sound? Okay, so right off the bat, right, we found this cool little guy right here, which I think sounds great. And so now, if we were to pull off of the transient here, and then do the same thing to where we throw this into a sampler or something. I already know that this is an F sharp, that's why I did that. So we could literally just, maybe not, just drag that in like this. Set this to F sharp 2. Turn on the attack, turn on the release, and play this. And we can kind of just find a sweet spot. I've done this many times, so this is nothing that's, you know, should be new. But if we were to maybe put a low pass on here, and we can come back to this now, and if we're like, oh, we need some other kind of musical thing or whatever, or maybe we don't. Maybe what I want to do is I want to try to find other stuff that's going to be musical with this, as opposed to trying to, again, be in that conform state of like, I want to play, like I need to play chords. Like, why do I need chords in this? Sorry, let me turn this off real quick. But yeah, why do I need chords? maybe I want something else melodic, but I don't know what it is. Well, we've got something that is already tonal here, so we can start to try a bunch of different stuff. Like we could try Portal. We could also try something like Infiltrator. We could also decimate this to hell. But see, now I've given myself one single parameter on this. The only thing that I am doing is I am making sure that this stays in key, or making sure that it stays in scale. And so with that, you know, this is where you start to like put these different kinds of, how do you say, these different kinds of restrictions on yourself. This is the only time that you should start to do that, whenever you start going back into intention. But it's a general thing, right? And you don't have to stay in key. We could totally change the key of this. Maybe we don't stay in key, and I'm like, you know what, I like the rhythm of that, but like the thing can change. Everything that is within a project can change. And it's really important that you maintain that, because the more that you keep yourself open to these kinds of things, and like it's also about being aware of like what you're willing to change. I guess that's a great point. What are you willing to do? What are you willing to manipulate? What are you willing to let go of? Because none of it matters. None of it matters. And that's really important, is that none of this stuff matters. And it doesn't mean that it, like in an existential way, but as a means of it can all morph into something completely different. And a lot of times, again, the more that you allow yourself to do something like that, the more interesting that you're going to make your stuff. So I don't know, let's listen to this. Is this on? Okay, great. This sounds really cool. So we can kind of just keep that F sharp and maybe keep some reflections on here. Maybe something that we can also do is change the timing of this to be a little bit slower. Same thing with, that's going to be a little fat, that'll be the same. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to let this play out. This is an F sharp. But we're starting to get some cool sounds, so maybe something else that we could do is we can set this to fifths. Is there a gate on here? Pan, gain, compress, shift, spread, corrupt. It doesn't seem like there's a gate on here. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we can swap this around. You see how I'm starting to get like something that's kind of a melody now? That doo-doo, doo-doo was really cool. So I want to see if there's a way that I might be able to pull that back. Maybe on this I can set this to textures. You can saturate it. Okay, so I actually found a lot of stuff in here that's really cool. So we can take this whole thing. The first thing that I found was not tonal, but I found something else. And that's okay. And we can always go back and try again. But towards the end of this, I think, it was like tee-tee-doot, tee-tee-doot. We do need to go back and find it. I think it's here. Okay, that's actually really cool as well. So as a whole different like idea or whatever, right? We've got a third section now. So maybe this is section 1A. Open up. This is section 1A. This is section 1B. We'll take the same piece of this, and this is very broken, right? Because it's not even a beat yet. But at the same time, like we're already kind of finding stuff that, like, I don't know, it could work. It could, like, we're making stems, you know. But listen to this. This sounds really cool. You know, what if we do another thing right here to where, yeah, so maybe on these guys though, there's kind of a click in there, and that's just something that I hear. But listen to this riff. Okay, there's still a click in there. It's kind of cool, but it's kind of crunchy. So now we could beef this sound up. We can layer it. So maybe, I don't know, like a pitch shifter or something could be cool. The pitch shifter on here is really cool for sound design. It's not really cool for doing what it's intended to do. Although that's not bad. Maybe we can add a touch of convolution reverb, or sorry, not convolution, but a touch of Pro R2. Let's add some saturation to it. Now you see how this is like pretty prominent here, so that's where we can move the Pro Q3 and just adjust it a bit. Now this is already quiet, so something that we can do is use this as a background layer. We can use it as a main fundamental, or sorry, like as a main riff or whatever, and start to layer it. Or there's lots of different options, so, you know, explore them all, or explore all the ones that seem interesting to you or whatever, right? Because to me this is kind of cool. This might work better as a layer, so kind of like so. And maybe what I can do on this is, okay, that's already at 100% mix, but maybe on this I could just set that to 100% like this. So that's cool. You know, the other thing is that you can start to change the riff and stuff or whatever. Like you can change the pattern. You can set it to repitch. If this idea is the coolest idea that you came up with, then just do that, you know. We can also see if there's anything else interesting in here. So That's kind of cool. We can pull something rhythmic out of this if we want to. We could also do something like this to, like, maybe we don't want it to be super musical. We can just move this out of the way, and we can, you know, create a different riff like this. So and we can take all this other stuff off except for maybe let's try these two and let's see what this sounds like without it. Right, so we've got a whole different thing that can be a different kind of riff, you know, and this does have a tone, but it's not really like, oh, this is in F sharp. It's kind of just like, oh, that sounds like something. Maybe this is really cool and we like the rhythm of this placement, but we want to change it. Maybe over time we want to use a frequency shifter and we want to change this into something that is going to kind of pitch up over time. So I would actually not recommend the kilohertz frequency shifter for this. I would recommend the regular one if you're in Bitwig Studio, because what you can do is set a range on here to, like, say 50, and then you can actually, instead of like having to be really fine tuning or whatever, you can just do this. So we can try the kilohertz pitch shifter on this one. This one is better for so, you know, we we just came out with several ideas with a tom. And yes, we can turn that tom into a bass. Yes, we can turn that tom into a kick and snare. We can turn it into really anything that you want it to be. But what is most important is that I found all this stuff by chance. I found all this stuff by just exploring and just having a good time with making sounds. The key component of this is not to, try to just be like, okay, I'm going to make this kind of song and I'm going to design this kind of bass and I'm going to design this kind of kick and this kind of snare and whatever. While that can be helpful in a lot of ways, you still are missing out on quite a lot of possibilities that feel more rewarding at times. I do think that audiation is really important. That's where you can imagine, hearing something in your head. But the thing is that whenever you're exploring with sound design, a lot of this stuff that you're making, you've never heard before. There is a marriage between the two. And I know this because I've cultivated it. It's something that I've talked with my partner, Corey, about. If you're doing academic audiation, that's where you're just able to close your eyes, and a lot of times it's more for orchestral music or classical music or whatever, but you can hear a piano or hear several different instruments all playing at once and then notate it. But that's a lot. That technique has been refined because these instruments have existed for centuries. So what you have to practice is taking the core of what you can utilize, the core of what you can imagine, placement, compositional things, and not be so specific to the instrument that you're trying to replicate. If I know that I want to hear a rhythm or something that's just like, in the context of the sound doesn't matter that much because let me back up. The timbre of the sound doesn't matter that much because I have the context of it. And that rhythm that I just did could be multitudes of sound. It could be multitudes of things. If I was going to beatbox something, let me see here. Like, okay, I don't really know what that might sound like in context, but I have a reference point about like, oh, cool, I've got some basses, I've got some different kinds of drums, something that's kind of clappy, and start working towards that rhythm. That's what's really important. But within that audiation that I just did, or within that beatboxing that I technically sung out, we can take any source and start working towards that direction from there. You know what I'm saying? Does that make more sense? Because it's not even about like, oh, I need to find that bass that's going to fit with what I have in my head. I need to find that snare or that clap that's within what's in my head. It's more so about having like a general like gray. It's kind of like looking at something that's hella blurry and then like putting on glasses or something and then like, now there's the detail or whatever later, or letting it become something. Let it reveal itself to you. Let it unfold. And this is kind of just a way that I do that. This is a self-expression about how I understand this concept. I still think that I'm not really satisfied with the point that I'm trying to drive home, and maybe somebody in the comments can help me out, or I don't know if one of my buddies, Zane Cage or Chi, sees this. Maybe I can bring one of you all on the channel or something and talk more about this. I would love to have all of those guys back on the channel. It would be really cool to have them all at once. No promises. They're busy people. But yeah, I mean, this is just kind of how I understand music now, and this is kind of what I work towards. And hopefully, if you take one cool thing away from this, and even if it's not the whole point, then I feel like I've done my job. So there's that. Now comes the advertisements. Alckemy.com to check out my sounds, book a lesson with me, especially if you want to talk philosophy or you want to talk about this kind of approach. I've got merchandise, so people don't know this, but down in the description there's a thing that has a shelf, and I've got shirts and pants. They're kind of expensive, but that's not by my choice. I make very little profit off of that. It's just the print on demand is kind of pricey, but they're cool. Let's see what else. That's pretty much it. Go watch my other stuff. Go binge, go have fun, and hopefully with these videos that I put on, you can kind of just like, if you really want to pay attention to it, you can, but this is more so of just stuff that's kind of podcasty, I guess, where I'm just trying to teach this as if I were teaching it to myself. So if there's any other topics that you would like me to cover, I would love to know. If there's any questions you have, I would also like to know. But the biggest call to action that I could probably request is to please like the video. Please leave a comment or something, and tell somebody about my channel. And that would be awesome, because I'm just trying to grow, and I'm trying to talk about stuff that matters to me. I'm not saying that I'm the most interesting person in the world, but I care about what I do, and I care about the music more than anything. You know, I care about figuring this project out, you know, because I'm still a student. I'm still somebody that's learning. Like, let's figure out how to walk this path of cultivation to where we are becoming masters of our own imagination. That's the path I'm on. Much love, guys. I really appreciate you listening to this session here or whatever, and hopefully you can look beyond the context of the sounds themselves and just understand the approach that I'm trying to portray. Bye, everybody. Have a lovely day. Alckemy.com.